Airtable is a database platform that's as easy to use as a spreadsheet. It lets organizations create internal tools that essentially functions as its own custom software. You'll see teams using it for everything from project trackers and content calendars to CRMs and product development dashboards. This combines powerful user interfaces with a backend database and automations to tie it all together. In this video, we're going to review Airtable's core features, its pros and its cons, its pricing, to help you determine if this is the right tool for you. Hi, I'm Dan Lehman from Automation Helpers. Our agency's helped hundreds of businesses build on top of Airtable. We also run a website called softwarefinds.com, where we have lots of tools and visualizations to help you determine the right software that you need in your business. Let's go ahead and jump into Airtable. So like I mentioned, there's a lot about Airtable that feels like it comes from a spreadsheet kind of background. But that's kind of where it ends. The look and the feel of part of this seems like a spreadsheet, but really we have a powerful database and we can build our own custom interfaces on top to create our own software. So for example, let's say we wanted a project management system. All of these tables that I have across the top are collections of different records. So I might have one table to represent all of the people on my team. I might have another table for all of the different projects that our company conducts. And then we've got another table for tasks, essentially all of the work that needs to be done for those projects. But unlike most project management systems, if we needed something else in this system, we could simply add it. We could add our own tables. So for example, maybe we want a hybrid CRM and project management system. So we could have a new deals table, and whenever a deal closes, we could automatically create a project. Or maybe we want to track phases within projects. Again, we can create our own table. And within tables, we can choose what data we're tracking through the use of different fields. And we can create as many of these as we need. We've got lots of different types of fields, things you'd expect like text fields, and we've got attachments, and we have single and multi-selects. But we've got a lot of different options to choose from to make sure that the data really works exactly the way that we want, and it validates that data. It's not like a spreadsheet where, hey, you can just type anything into a cell. Instead, we're really carefully structuring this data. And some of the newer functionality that we have is the ability to create these field agents, essentially AI-enabled fields. So maybe we want to have web research and we pull back information from companies automatically that's fed into Airtable. We can do that. We can create different images. All of these things we can do with special kinds of fields called field agents. Now, what really makes this a database is our ability to link together, to connect different types of data. So for example, in a project management system, when I have tasks and projects, I want the two to connect. I want them to talk to one another. So here on my tasks, I have what's called a linked record field. This is a project, and this actually links to this separate projects table. So what that means is when we're on here, we can choose from our available projects to actually connect to that data in the backend. And so we have special kinds of fields that allow us to talk back and forth between those tables automatically. So here I'm on my projects, and because those projects are linked to the tasks, we can do things like automatically calculate the start date of the project based on those linked tasks. Which is the earliest task that kicks off the project? Well, then we have the start date. Or what's the last one that we have for the end date? Well, that's now the end date of the project. We also have formula fields. And again, this is going to feel similar to a spreadsheet application where we can have formulas that automatically calculate things. For example, what's the difference between the start date and end date? And because of that, now we can determine how many days are our project duration. Now, to be honest, it would be pretty boring if our data only sat here as this spreadsheet-like grid view. Yes, it's helpful to be able to view information like this, but this isn't how our brains always want to process this information. So we can create different kinds of views to go along and represent our data in the best way that makes sense. So for tasks, for example, I might want to have a timeline where I can view all the different tasks and the duration that they take up. And this might be a more meaningful way for me to visualize that data. So a timeline view for a project management tool would be really helpful for, say, a project manager who needs to manage the actual execution across the overall scope and needs to relay this information back to stakeholders. So being able to see the durations is going to be really helpful. An individual worker on a project, however, might find it more useful to look at a Kanban style view. And these views have special properties within them. So for example, we could add filters as well. So instead of viewing all of the tasks across the system, now we want to view it by an individual user. And so I can see exactly what they're working on. And so these views have different settings of how they appear and how we want to filter it and group it and sort it. In this case, when I look at a timeline, I want this to be grouped by the project I'm working on. If I didn't have it grouped, it would look way uglier. Now I'm looking at all of the tasks in the whole system. Airtable is definitely meant to be really collaborative. So for example, if I want to work on one of these tasks, I can open up this record. We can invite different people to it. As we're updating data, we can actually see who's making those changes in real time. And we have the ability to do things like leave comments to different people on our team so that they can get notifications about what's going on. Additionally, because this is a collaborative environment, we can also see the revision history. So if we want to be able to audit this or quickly review what changes have happened, we can do this with this revision history. Now, while Airtable is great for collaboration, its permissions are not the most granular in nature. I can click on a table and I can edit table permissions. We have different ability to set who can create and who can delete these different tasks. And we've got a couple different roles of editors and creators, or assigning things to specific users, or nobody at all. And we do have a little bit more granularity in our interfaces. So we can say, hey, I only want these people to be able to see this interface or to be able to interact with this specific data. But compared to some of the other systems out there, Airtable's permissions are not quite as robust. Now, by and large, Airtable is really designed to be used by people within your company. But there's always these times where you want to be able to create external forms that anybody can submit and actually enter new information. So up at the top here, you see this ability to create forms. Here's an example form. You can do some light branding with it, but this would allow people to be able to externally submit information, which then is going to automatically be sent into the base. Now, besides the different views and the forms that we have, Airtable really ties this together with the use of their interfaces feature. Here at the top, you can see we were interacting kind of in this data backend layer. This anymore isn't what we really show to people on our team. Yes, it's there, and maybe we can kind of view it as a backend administrator, but most of the time, we're going to actually have our team interacting with the data via interfaces. So this is an example of a project management interface. And just like you can control and configure how you want the tables to appear, the kinds of fields that you want to have on those tables, you can also configure exactly what these interfaces look like. So for example, here's a getting started page, which kind of showcases what we have inside of our interface. And we can expand these different areas so that this is really just kind of one management console. It's one area that our team can live. So if I'm working on projects, then I can see exactly what I need to within the project and nothing else. And again, we can tailor exactly who sees different pages of our interfaces. So if you're an individual worker on these projects, you don't need the high-level information for the dashboards, but instead, if you're a project manager, then that's exactly what you'd want to be able to see. So here's an example of an interface where I could see the tasks that I am working on. I don't need the context of all the projects. I just want to be able to see what tasks do I currently have to do? How many are on my to-do list? How many do I already have done? And then I want to see a timeline of this information, maybe tasks by project, and I can see what's coming up in the future. Now here we have projects and tasks. This is essentially a list of the projects and their underlying tasks. And what's kind of cool is that we can actually see information from different tables in the same area. So for example, we could have different fields that come from the project. If I want to see details about that project, I can open that up. Or if I want to see details about an individual task, that can pull open that information on the side. So these interfaces are really great at helping with processes. You can see the projects. You can then drill down into the task details. We can add buttons to these as well that we can actually trigger automated processes. Now, these interfaces are still essentially kind of view-based. We can take those different views and incorporate them. So for example, Here we have a schedule, which is incorporating that timeline, or we could have a Gantt view here as well. We've got our Kanban just like before. So it's not really like views and interfaces are entirely distinct. You still want to use views within interfaces, but these interfaces really let you string all of this information together in different ways. The other thing that's nice about interfaces is that we have dashboarding capabilities. So we can see at a high level, especially for executives, it's great to see this information. Easy to be able to click and drill into all the information as well. Now, just as an aside, what I love about Airtable's reporting capabilities is that we can report on any of the data that we have inside of our database. So that's super useful. Sometimes the visualizations aren't quite as robust as I would like, and so occasionally I find myself on certain projects still pulling out data from Airtable into other tools like Looker, but that's really an edge case. Most companies are pretty happy with the reporting inside of Airtable. Next up, let's talk about Airtable's automation capabilities. So like almost any kind of automation system, we have triggers and actions. Triggers are going to kick off our automation. And what's great about Airtable is that we have a lot of different options. We can go based off of a form submission or a record being created or updated. We can go off of a certain time if we want to have some kind of report that happens every single day. We've got when webhook received. So if we have some outside kind of system and we want to be able to pull in information inside of Airtable, we can do that. We also have kind of a newer one to actually take emails that come in. So you could set up a forwarder from, say, Gmail and send messages into the system to actually take and ingest that information. And we can also do these based on button clicks. So that means if you're in an interface and you say, hey, I want to automatically update this project, press a button, kick off an automation. You do see that there are a handful of integrations down here, especially when it comes to the Google and Microsoft ecosystems. These are basic in nature. There's a few different options for these. Ultimately, if you want to do more kind of integration work, then typically you're still going to rely on a Make, a Zapier, and N8N to be able to actually integrate data between systems. But we do have some useful options that we can do directly inside of Airtable. And then we have our actions. So we have conditional logic. That would mean we can determine whether we should proceed with the next steps. We can have repeating groups. In code, we would call this a loop. So if you say, hey, I've got a list of 10 contacts, and for each contact, I want to send them each an individual email, we could do that then with this repeating group logic. For actions here, you can see we can send emails, we can create and update records, we can find records within the database. This is a really useful step that we use on a lot of more advanced automations. We can run scripts. This is so powerful. If you essentially need to run like a snippet of JavaScript to be able to do something more advanced. So for example, sometimes we build project management tools with like a forecasting engine, and we want to pull historical data and manipulate it and then kind of generate a test project from it. Then scripting is nice to be able to have. You can't do that in a lot of other systems because of the guardrails needed to prevent systems from going crazy. So there are guardrails around it. You can't just install all of the JavaScript libraries that you want to it or anything like that, but it allows you to do some more advanced logic. We can use different AI features within the context of automations as well. So before, when we were talking about field agents, those just kind of happen automatically within the data itself. But here we can have automations that run as well to help us take maybe a collection of records that we found and then go out to the web and pull some information back and then write it into our data. And then here you can see some additional integration actions that we have. We have more on the action side than we do on the triggers. But again, you might use outside tools like Zapier or Make if you want more integrations. Now, there are some kind of wonky limits around automations. For example, the number of automations that you can have in a base or the number of steps that you can have inside of one automation itself. So some of that kind of makes us do some weird workarounds to be able to solve it. But in general, it's still a really strong system. Now, speaking of AI, Airtable has really bundled together a lot of its AI features with a tool they've called Omni. So you can open up this tool anywhere inside of Airtable, and it has a number of different functions. So some things you could do are actually ask the AI, ask Omni about your data. You want to find out information and have it draw insights. Well, you can just talk to it. You can ask questions. So, for example, I could ask a question like, hey, what are the projects I have with the most open tasks? And not only is it going to pull that information back, but now I've got a visualization. I can actually expand this. I could save that information if I want to. Really easy to be able to actually get insights back from the data. Omni also includes the ability to build the structure of your bases and interfaces, all of that from the AI as well. So here we could tell it to build new fields or tables, and it would be able to do that as well. Or you could even put in some higher level requests. You could say, build me a project management system, and it could do that too. Now, as an Airtable consultant, I'm a little bit biased because we find a lot of issues that happen with the tool. It's not necessarily giving you all the best practices, but boy, it sure helps people get up and running with the platform to be able to enter some simple prompts. We've got a couple other new, pretty cool tools as well. One would be this web table. So you could say, hey, pull me these companies in my industry. It's going to pull all that information and can actually create the tables and inject that data for you. Another thing that we can do, which has kind of been a criticism of Airtable in the past, is the ability to create our own custom elements. Now, historically speaking, we've had these views which work pretty well, but if you have outside things you want to create, you want to have a custom map, and you want to be able to inject that into your interface, well, you couldn't really do that. And we had these extensions that we could use in the past, but extensions weren't really supported in interfaces. So it's kind of a messy period of time for a while. But now we're getting the ability where you can just prompt and say, hey, I want to make this special visualization, and it can actually create the code on its own in the background. So far, we've really focused on the browser experience of Airtable, but there is a mobile application that you can use as well. Now, I wouldn't say this is the best mobile application. You download it, it's got Airtable's branding, not really your company's branding. And then here we've got access to our interfaces, but some of them are kind of more or less optimized for mobile. So I've got a dashboard. This looks pretty nice. I can click on different elements within it to be able to see some more information. I can expand certain pieces of these and open up different records. Let me click on a different one here where I've got a list view. You can see, it works okay. We can scroll horizontally here. We can click into a record. We can make the updates that we want, but it still just doesn't feel like the experience was really designed for mobile. So this is one area that if you're saying, hey, we want a really powerful mobile application for these internal apps that we're building, I almost always then refer people to use Glide instead in these use cases. Technically, you can use Airtable and Glide together. It's not a great experience. I typically recommend going kind of Glide native tables for that kind of functionality. So up to you, nothing's stopping you from using Airtable's mobile app. It certainly functions, it's just not really the best experience. Now let's talk about extending the Airtable platform. So I mentioned that there's these marketplace extensions that have some additional functionality. But again, the problem is these work with kind of the old Airtable with all of the views, and they don't really work with the new interfaces. Now the new interfaces are letting us create our own extensions for interfaces. Will they be the same as these? I don't know. Will they create a new marketplace for these? I don't know. Presumably, I think they would kind of intersect these two, but Airtable's never been really great at having this big community of marketplace extensions and apps, unlike other tools like Monday.com. The same thing kind of goes for templates. So Airtable has this area that they maintain of their active templates with plenty of different use cases for it. They're growing this as they're adding the AI functionality where they're generating more of these. So there's some more use cases here. Now, historically, in the past, there was something called Airtable Universe. I guess technically it still exists, but no one adds anything new to it. It's just these dinosaurs of old templates, most of which I don't think even include interfaces. So Airtable's really doubling down on Omni. They don't really want you to use a template. They want you to create it with a prompt. And with that prompt, no two bases and interfaces are going to look exactly identical. So really, templates seem to be kind of a way of the past. Now, when it comes to integrating, Airtable has a pretty powerful API. It allows you to do a lot of things that you'd expect. You can create new tables and list records and get records and create records. Some things I don't love. One thing would be that you can see some of these tagged with enterprise, and especially things like user management under org management, which is enterprise. I would want to be able to access my users via just the standard API and not have to be on enterprise, but overall it's pretty good. Another thing I don't love about Airtable's API If you want to list records, get a list of records, and you want to add or apply a filter to it to take back a subset of records, then you have to filter by their formula language. So imagine like Excel style formulas. You have to actually encode all of that to make sure that it functions as opposed to much more standard API calls. So not my favorite stuff, but again, tons of people use the API, so it's very functional. The biggest issue when it comes to the API is that your API is limited to 5 requests per second per base. So here's the deal. Airtable has this massive ecosystem, and there's all of these tools that historically have been kind of a way to get a little bit around some of the Airtable licensing. So rather than pay for all of the users, hey, use this client portal tool made by a different company, and you get access to your Airtable data. Well, Airtable kind of responds and says, well, fine, we don't want you to really have a great user experience. We're going to slap on some pretty vindictive, I guess I would say, the limits to it. So this means that if you want to integrate with Airtable, you're going to be limited to the number of requests. If you have multiple people accessing data at the same time, boom, that is a hard limit. So I think personally, I'm a bit disillusioned because Airtable is this like powerhouse of a tool with great automation, and we want to connect it and be a hub of all these systems. And yet it really doesn't want to play nice with other systems in the ecosystem. Now, you don't have to use the API by itself, especially if you're not very technical. That's where platforms like Zapier would come in handy. So for our triggers, I find this is pretty limiting. I mean, we can say a new record comes in, or there's a new or updated record, and that handles a lot of use cases because again, remember all of our tables, we just configure ourselves. So it's not like we have a special option for a new contact being created. That's just going to be a new record here. So this works pretty well, but I wish we had additional things in the Zapier integration, such as like a new comment being added would be really helpful. And then our triggers, we've got more options here. You can see we can add comments and create bases and create records and all these kind of things. So we have a lot more functionality here on the actions, especially when we're talking to different systems. You've got a deal in a CRM, and then you want to create a record inside of Airtable. That works really well. Now, one more way I should mention of pulling data inside of Airtable is with synced tables. So if we were to create a new table, you can see some options to add from other data sources. Here we can choose where this comes from. So Airtable, you can actually pull data from other Airtable bases. Those could be synced tables, but it could come from other data sources as well. And so as opposed to having to rely on a third party to do this for you, it's just going to automatically pull that data in. And you can see a number of highly used applications. However, there's not tons of different choices here. Let's go ahead and talk about pricing. And this is a pretty big deal when it comes to Airtable. So here we've got a few different plans. We've got a free plan, we've got team, business, and enterprise scale. So we do have a free plan that you can stay on, and it includes up to 5 editors. As soon as you hit an additional editor, well, now you need to pay for each one of those users. So this $20 is per seat per month for each one of those users. Just to make sure you're not getting confused here, this is not what you're paying for the whole system. This is per user. Now here, to be really honest, if you are a business, I've never really found a business that can operate on the free plan. I've seen some fun, creative projects where people are doing it for consumer purposes to create a free base, but it's really going to be these record limits that are going to force you to upgrade because 1,000 records is really nothing when you think of most use cases. So here we've got team and business. Now, enterprise scale, of course, you have to inquire about pricing there. But this comes down to essentially it's a lot of technical features as you look at it. One thing that's interesting is that you get these AI credits included on a per user basis. But here it's going to be things again like how many records do you need per base? So you just kind of have to think about this. Like if you're building a project management system or an HR system or an inventory management system, I mean, inventory management is going to be one where you really eat through a lot of records because if you want to have sales orders and then you have sales order line items, those are all records. And then you have the products, those are all records. So really try to think about what you're going to be needing from that standpoint. A lot of businesses I know end up being on business, I'd say far more than I see typically than who have team. and then, of course, enterprise scale if you need it. Now, there is a fairly new portal add-on. It's pretty expensive compared to some of the other portal options that integrate with Airtable on the market, because you can see essentially you're still paying, this is $150 for 15 guests. Well, that's effectively $10 per guest that you have. So if you have a use case where, it's more than that, you've got, 50 clients you want to work with, you can see where those costs start to accelerate a little bit. In terms of the feature gating, we're starting to see some more gating that's happening where they really want you to be on business or enterprise scale. You can see it's starting to happen here for visualizations where the roadmap view and executive summary cards are being pushed up. Again, the standard ones that we kind of talked about and showed through the video are going to be generally available, although down here we've got project management functionality, and that's going to be on the team plan. And then there's just certain features like you want to conditionally filter things. Like you want to be able to say, hey, I only want to see contacts who are at this account that I've pre-selected. Well, that features on business. And I say that because it's sometimes so arbitrary which features are going on which plans. So in general, for most businesses I work with, I typically say, hey, we might be able to start with team for a period of time, but just make sure that you're budgeting for being on the business plan. Now, in some ways, this user licensing is still incredibly affordable, especially when you think, oh, I can actually replace a lot of the systems I'm already using because we can really build our own custom software on this application, so we can reduce the per user licenses that we're doing on some of the other apps. And so that's a huge win. But on the other hand, there are plenty of solid alternatives with much more attractive price points. Okay, let's talk about who Airtable is a good fit for. If you're a small to medium business and you're looking to really standardize your operations, Airtable gives you this plethora of tools that lets you really build the software that you want. Alternatively, if you are a team within an enterprise organization, you're going to see a lot of value as well from some of the more advanced features. Airtable's got a great user experience, a great community backing it, and so you've got a really solid option here. But if you're a little bit more budget conscious and you can only afford the team plan, I'd maybe compare a couple different options, because really the direction of where this is all going is trying to push more and more companies upmarket to their business and enterprise scale. And if you're an organization that doesn't really have custom business processes, you always find yourself just buying off-the-shelf software. So you use Salesforce and you connect it to Asana for project management, and you don't want to really kind of build your own structure, then this probably isn't the right fit either. There's kind of this feeling that you are a builder, that you build something unique. Either you do it yourself or you work with outside consultants to be able to build that for your business. If after watching this video, Airtable is a great tool and you want to use it, but you're not quite sure where to get started, feel free to reach out on our website at automationhelpers.com, where we're offering free consultations.